Welcome back to the next session of Object Oriented Analysis and Design. In the previous class, we had seen the software development methodologies and we had understood the 7 phases which are required for the deployment of the project. Let's have a small recall about the 7 phases. The first phase talks about the planning and gathering of the requirements. The second phase talks about the system analysis. The third phase talks about modeling. The fourth phase talks about design. The fifth one is your coding or implementation part. The sixth one is the testing. And finally, the seventh module talks about the maintenance and the deployment of the project. When we focus more on software development issues, there are mainly two orthogonal views on software development. The first one is completely a traditional technique, where this traditional technique only focuses on data and functions. The data could be a raw data or the data could be a consistent data. And the functionalities. What are the operations that can be done on that particular data? For example, if I am working on the data, a numerical data, the operations like addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division would be the functions that could be operated on the numerical data. The second one is your object oriented methodologies. When I talk about the object oriented methodologies, it combines the data and its functionalities. For example, if I take an object, the object will be having attributes. And the attributes, along with the object attributes, you will be having the functionality. For example, let us consider a human as an object. When I consider human as an object, the attributes are eyes, nose, and ears. And the functionalities could be watching, sneezing, and hearing. The functionalities are totally different well compared with the attributes. Each attribute again will be having its values. For example, if I consider eye as an attribute, how many eyes? Two. So that talks about the attribute value. How many nose? One. It is an attribute value. The color of the bicycle is red. The color of the bicycle is red. So here you had to understand the object is bicycle, the attribute is color, and the value of that particular attribute is red. So each and every statement will be completely focusing on objects. Objects in return will be having some attributes, and the attributes will be having some values, a specific value. An object oriented system development separately talks about building objects that can be easily replaced, modified, and reused. This feasibility of replacing or modifying or reusing the content is completely absent in our traditional techniques because those are well furnished content where the data is maintained separately and the functionalities are maintained separately, and both of them does not have any kind of interconnection between them. Whereas the object oriented software development system brings the two modules, that is data and functions, and these two things are wrapped together. Objects has attributes. I said those are data. And at the same time, objects will be having methods. Those are nothing but functions. When I talk about a clear object oriented system, the software development should be easier to adapt any kind of changes. At the same time, it should be easier to maintain. It should be in a feasible manner that I should be in a position to promote greater designs, and I should be in a position to reuse the code. And finally, when I talk about any kind of method generations, my functions, my existing functions, or the hybrid functions which I had written for the development of the model should be feasible enough that it could jump from one module to another module based on the necessity. So, when I'm talking about an object oriented model, it is purely focusing on objects which is having attributes and functions as a single unit. When these set of classes, when these set of classes containing n number of objects in them could be easily representing a system. So again, let us, without disturbing the traditional content, the object oriented methodology mainly focuses on objects and how it is combining its data and functions. The functions we normally and generally call them as methods. When I'm talking about OOAD, the question rises in your mind: what is object oriented analysis? What is object oriented design? And what is object oriented modeling? When I'm talking about object oriented modeling and how this OOM is closely associated with object oriented analysis and object oriented design. When I'm talking about analysis, it is a process of investigation of a problem and the requirements, then finding its solution. The detailed analysis, how had to start, from which level we had to start, and what are the models and the representations needed. And this analysis is again classified into two different items. One is requirement analysis, and the second one is object oriented analysis. When I talk about requirement analysis, okay, at the level at what are the basic ingredients needed for the development of the model. But when you are talking about object oriented analysis, it describes what are the objects or what is the concepts which are required for your project development. I'll give you a best example. In flight information system, during analysis, the concepts are identified as plane, flight, and pilot. So when I'm talking about pilot, or when I'm talking about plane, or when I'm talking about flight, these three are objects. A plane is an object. You can see it flying in the sky. A flight is an object. You can see it flying in the sky. Pilot is an object. You can see this guy is maintaining both of them. The difference: flight information systems. Analysis: how the plane works on and how the flight works on. And what is the role of pilot either in plane or flight? You're getting it? So the detailed analysis, how many objects are associated? and what kind of attributes that those objects are taking into picture, and how the implementation is getting into consideration. The second step of the object oriented analysis and design is object oriented design. You had to find a conceptual solution that fulfills the requirements in the analysis state. Once the analysis part is being completed, the analysis moves along with the conceptual solution to object oriented design. Here again, the design is classified into two works. One is database design, and the second one is your object oriented design. When I talk about a database design, it is purely my backend and how the backend will be working on the rare part by connecting the interface as per the sophisticator need. But when we are focusing on object oriented design, the users, the actors, the scenarios will be coming into picture. How many actors or how many users are being used for this project? And what is the complete scenario or what is the complete use case that is to be considered? For example, the object oriented design, software objects are defined and collaborated to fulfill the requirement. So, when I'm talking or when I'm defining a process, this object oriented analysis and object oriented design are both combined together, and it is a step by step process where the design implementation should be focused only upon the successful completion of the analysis of the data. Let us consider again your flight information system as an example. I'm taking the attribute as tail number and I'm using a method called as get the flight history. So what is the history of this particular flight in the last 1 week? From where did it travel and from when it has been traveled and how many rounds it had been procured? All those things to be recognized and those to be recorded and those to be retrieved as on when we require the flight history. Finally, to summarize these words, analysis and design in OOAD, do the thing right is the second option. Do the right thing would be the first option. Always do the right thing so that do the thing right. Both the statement looks like, but there is a small variation. Do the right thing and do the thing right. Choosing what is to be correct could be your analysis. Doing what is already accepted to be correct, that is nothing but do the thing right. Do the right thing. Do the thing right. One talks about your analysis, and the second talks about your design. The representation of an object in OAD, let us go with an example. I had a domain concept of a plane or a flight, whatever you take into picture. I'm taking my object as a plane, or you can consider it as a flight. It is by default, I'm considering as a tail number, and I'm considering as get flight history. So in this diagram, I had the plane as an object. The plane has a tail. The tail is an attribute and tail has a number. The tail number will be acting as an attribute value. What is the functionality? What is the method that we are using for this flight development? I am retrieving the data by the past history of the flight. And based on the information, I can gather the pilot's information, who had been traveled from one location to another and who is been acting as a rider for it. This could be a complete visualization of domain concept where I can convert my design oriented content into a code oriented content. UML and rational unified processing is a beautiful concept where the design could help automatically in generating the code. This talks about your object oriented analysis and object oriented design. With this, we will stop here, and in the next session, we will look into more examples in defining a use case, a domain model, an interaction diagram, and